Spotlight on America presents Crossing the Line at the Doctor's Office.
He just sexually assaulted me with his ungloved hand, and it wasn't a pelvic exam at all.
Physicians are among our most respected professionals, but what happens when they abuse a patient's trust?
He proceeded to stick his hand down my shirt, and it was all very strange, and I felt really uncomfortable.
Our investigation reveals troubling concerns about the system designed to hold doctors to account.
The forces are really stacked up against solving this national crisis of inadequate discipline of doctors.
A toxic danger hiding in plain sight, rubberized floors made with mercury.
When I found out that I was being exposed to this right under my feet and that it's a carcinogen, that's when I really started to go,
We explore why some school gyms and community centers across the country are being treated as toxic waste sites.
It would not be a stretch to say that there is a floor like this in every community in America.
And as the conflict in Ukraine rages on,
at least if we can help with this, it will help them to survive and hold on.
we meet a Ukrainian woman living in America, doing whatever she can to help alleviate the suffering back home. And we share the story of support that turned her driveway into a gateway of hope for her war-ravaged homeland.
It brought me to tears. I'm really thankful.
Years after the Me Too movement brought to light a wave of allegations of sexual misconduct in Hollywood and on Capitol Hill, some are calling for a similar national reckoning in a surprising field, medicine. Sexual misconduct by doctors is a rare occurrence, but when it happens, it casts a dark shadow over a profession built on trust. For the past several months, Spotlight on America has been digging into doctor discipline files state by state, and we uncovered dozens of incidents of impropriety. We were surprised to discover that discipline in many of these cases wasn't as automatic as you might expect. In this report, we introduce you to victims who say their doctor preyed on female patients for years. And we peel back the curtain on a system designed to hold physicians accountable when they cross the line. We want to warn you, some of the content in this story is graphic. There are secrets every woman keeps, but at some point, even the darkest of them can bubble to the surface. That's what happened to Lisa Pratt and her best friend Katie Medley in the summer of 2020, when something both had buried deep was revealed with a single question.
I'm like, did you ever have any weird experiences with Dr. Farley? Her face basically went white and it hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm like, hey, I'm not the only one.
When she hits you with that question,
I felt like I was gonna pass out. I felt just hot and flushed.
Lisa and Katie had trusted the same Oregon physician for years. He delivered their children and provided their routine care. During multiple visits, they both claim, though, he was sexually inappropriate with them. And they're not alone.
For chronic neuropathic pain.
Pratt and Medley are among more than 100 women suing this man, Dr. David Farley, for sexual misconduct they allege took place in this small family practice outside Portland. Court documents detail graphic allegations that Farley forced some patients to strip naked. Others, including minors, were allegedly subjected to unnecessary pelvic and breast exams, ungloved rectal exams, while others allege he photographed their genitals on his cell phone. What did you notice that sort of changed your mindset of this guy might not be exactly what I think?
When I look back, there were a lot of little red flags. I was in for my baby's 2-week appointment and he asked me how breastfeeding was going and I said, great, everything's going wonderfully. And then he proceeded to walk over and stick his face directly on my breast.
The worst experience of assault that I had with Dr. Farley was a pelvic exam during which he just sexually assaulted me with his ungloved hand, and it wasn't a pelvic exam at all.
Medley and Pratt took their complaints to the Oregon State Medical Board, the agency in charge of disciplining doctors. It initially allowed Farley, whose attorneys did not respond to our repeated attempts for comment, to voluntarily withdraw from practicing medicine without admitting any wrongdoing, pending an investigation. Weeks later, his license was revoked by the board.
If it weren't for us coming forward, his license would not have been revoked. He would have been able to quietly step away.
So you're just sort of collateral damage until they put something out?
Yes. Yeah.
How's that feel?
Awful. It hurts.
It's absolutely devastating.
And it's not unique to Oregon. A Spotlight on America investigation dug through doctor discipline records nationwide going back a few years. We found dozens of incidents of sexual misconduct by physicians from coast to coast, as well as evidence that some state medical boards failed to take quick or strong action to hold doctors accountable.
It is outrageous that the medical boards aren't doing a better job.
Dr. Sidney Wolf is the founder of the health research group at Public Citizen, a consumer advocacy group in Washington, D.C. He's been raising the alarm about sexual misconduct in medicine for years. Well, you'd think that this is a scenario where physicians would want to root out any bad apples so that they don't taint the whole profession, but that doesn't seem to happen. Why do you think that is?
Well, that's because there are too many people on the board who really don't think it's appropriate to go against their fellow doctors. The forces are really stacked up against solving this national crisis of inadequate discipline of doctors.
Our months-long investigation found a lack of transparency in some states. That means the public is not being warned about doctors who've engaged in sexual misconduct. Delays in taking action in some cases that could put patients at risk, and what some experts consider weak standards of punishment that often allow doctors to walk away or gives them a slap on the wrist, opening the door for them to potentially continue abusing patients. We uncovered at least 3 cases where doctors were allowed to quietly give up their medical licenses after repeated misconduct, including sexually violating male patients, conducting ungloved vaginal exams, even trying to have sex with a sedated patient at a hotel just hours after surgery. Spotlight on America also found several cases where the punishment for misconduct was probation or restrictions that merely barred doctors from seeing female patients but allowed them to keep practicing. In many of the cases that we looked at where doctors are disciplined, they're often given conditional discipline, things like they can't see female patients, they have to have a chaperone. Do those sorts of concessions actually work and curb this kind of behavior?
The evidence is quite clear that probation is a slap on the wrist. It's not effective. Zero tolerance is what there should be for sexual offenders in this country. It's a complete betrayal of the doctor-patient relationship.
In 2020, Dr. Wolf wrote a letter on behalf of Public Citizen to several medical organizations, calling for misconduct to be labeled as abuse and demanding a zero-tolerance policy for physicians engaged in that behavior. It's a more aggressive approach, he says, that has already been successful in parts of Canada and New Zealand. In your opinion, if a doctor is engaged in sexual misconduct, there should be no questions, revocation, no more practice for that physician.
I think that it is entirely appropriate and necessary for states in the United States to pass laws that say if we find that a doctor has been guilty of sexually abusing a patient, they lose their license for life unless it's something that does not involve sexual contact with the patient. If it happens, which hopefully is sooner rather than later, it will happen at the level of the state.
That's because doctors are regulated by state, not federal law, and they're governed by boards that many believe are often biased in favor of physicians. Spotlight on America discovered nationwide most medical boards include only a few members from outside the medical profession, if any at all. In Alabama and South Carolina, their medical boards don't include a single member of the public right now. Florida, Kansas, and Iowa have just 3 public members each, compared with 12, and 6 doctors, respectively. Only California and Delaware have a near equal balance.
Truly been doing everything they can.
Few know the arcane system of disciplining physicians better than Dr. Humayun Chowdhury. He's the president and CEO of the Federation of State Medical Boards.
Why don't we see?
We sat down with him to try to understand why the public isn't given a stronger voice on the boards that hold doctors accountable.
Why not equal up the number of members on this just to make it appear as though the process involves outside thinking?
Well, I think it's important to know that at one time, not too long ago, Josie, state boards had only physicians. There were no public members, zero. So we strongly support public engagement. And even if the numbers are small, I think it's also important to keep in mind that many times public members will become chairs of their boards.
But if they can be voted down and pushed aside because there's only 2 of them and there are 15 other members, they can voice their opinion, but at the end of the day, they're not the decision maker.
You're right, and there is a democratic process. It's a group process, and so the majority rules. But at the same time, because of the public member's unique role, when the public speaks through that representation, I've seen more often than not that voice being listened to.
Chowdhury claims his organization has long been a loud voice in the effort to curb sexual misconduct among physicians.
I think there are opportunities galore to tighten the process so that we have less of this and maybe even eliminate it. But I think everyone would agree that this is absolutely unacceptable and has to stop.
In 2020, the Federation released 38 recommendations for state boards, ranging from increased transparency to intensive education about what constitutes sexual misconduct. But none of those recommendations are binding. And almost 2 years later, our own survey of state boards found a mixed bag in terms of concrete action. One board even admitted to us they haven't adopted a single recommendation.
There are critics who would say your organization answers to its membership and then doesn't really have any teeth. How do you respond to that when you come up with thoughtful recommendations that should bring about change, but the states may not use them?
Well, that's an excellent point, and we do what we can to make them aware of our recommendations so that they don't just lie on a shelf somewhere, and we can nudge them. And we've had some very good conversations with state boards saying, well, we've done this. Do you think that's adequate? What are some neighboring states doing? And they don't have to adopt all of our recommendations. I think some of the more challenging ones are to encourage a change in the culture. I mean, that's a recommendation you can't just do overnight.
But patient advocates think action should be more significant than mere recommendations, especially in the wake of high-profile cases of long-standing abuse, including USA Gymnastics doctor Larry Nassar and former USC gynecologist George Tyndall, both of which took years to bring to light.
Do you think the medical community needs a Me Too reckoning of its own?
100%. To hold a doctor accountable seems to be 10 times harder. Absolutely, there should be a Me Too movement within the medical profession, and I hope to help start that.
How many of these cases do you think we have to see nationwide before somebody steps up to the plate at the federal level and says this system does not work?
I think that's the $1 million question. How many of these children and women do we have to parade across the media as collateral damage? The ones that are bearing the cost of there not being a way to prevent this from happening. I'm terrified to live in a society that doctors are beholden to no one. We need their help to provide accountability so that the good doctors can keep helping people and the malicious doctors can be stopped.
I'm Lisa Fletcher. Playtime is pure joy for kids. From the park to the playground to the school gymnasium, where little ones dash across a well-tread floor. They can play on it, lay on it, even sleep on it. But we discovered a potential danger may lurk beneath those gym floors nationwide. An odorless, invisible toxic vapor that can turn a once vibrant play space full of happy kids into a hazmat situation, requiring workers to suit up in containment gear.
It is like landmines in schools, and our children's health is on the line.
Trisha Dello Iacono knows what's at stake. She believes exposure from the floor of this New Jersey elementary school is what may be responsible for her son Liam's health problems since kindergarten. Everything from skin rashes to neurological and behavioral problems.
He has lifelong health issues because of his exposure. He would eat his lunch off of the floor that contained phenylmercuric acetate.
Starting back in the 1960s, phenylmercuric acetate was used to help harden inexpensive rubberized floors used everywhere from school gyms to cafeterias, hospitals, daycare centers, and even senior homes. As the floors wear down with age, experts say they're more likely to release neurotoxic mercury vapor, which can't be seen but can be inhaled.
There's parents all over the country who are unknowingly sending their child to schools that have this flooring.
So the clock is ticking to track down where these floors are located.
We've been kind of full-time able to devote our attention to this issue.
Alan Barkum is doing just that. He's an environmental hygienist and part of a unique team of experts in New Jersey, one of the only states taking aggressive action to identify and remove these floors.
It would not be a stretch to say that there is a floor like this in every community in America. 100%, if you identify a rubberized floor, it needs to be tested.
Period.
Period.
He told us he's pushing for urgent action because it's not only kids who are at risk.
A student is in a gym class for 30 minutes, 40 minutes a day. A gym teacher is in that gym for 8 hours a day.
Hi everybody, Mrs. McNally here.
Gym teachers like Melissa McNally. She's been teaching elementary school physical education in New Jersey for 2 decades, a longtime role model for healthy habits. But a shocking diagnosis in 2013 stopped her in her tracks.
At 36 years old, I was diagnosed with kidney cancer, a type that people don't typically get until they're in their 70s or 80s, and typically men.
She says her rare cancer is typically found in people who've had long-term exposure to toxins in industrial settings. For years, Melissa and her doctors were puzzled about the cause of her illness. Then she heard about phenylmercuric acetate in rubberized floors.
When I found out that I was being exposed to this right under my feet and that it's a carcinogen, that's when I really started to go, My doctor's, jaw kind of hit the floor a bit, where he was just kind of like, wow, really?
For Melissa, as she battled her own disease, she set out on a mission to speak up, pushing for more awareness and testing in her New Jersey school district.
I don't want to be the experiment, although I'm afraid I may already have been.
Her school system launched an investigation and ultimately removed and replaced the floor at the school where she works. But that's just one gymnasium.
I feel like every gym I walk into now that has a rubberized floor, I instantly think to myself, I wonder. And my own 2 children, go to a school where this is still in place.
Most of the teachers that we give our trainings to have never heard of this, and it kind of...
Alan Barkum told us that without a national reckoning, schools, especially in low-income or urban areas, will still have floors containing mercury that pose increasing risks as they wear down.
One of the biggest problems with these floors that we see is that schools either don't want to test in the first place, or once they do, they want to keep it a secret.
We asked him why schools would hesitate to act once mercury is detected. It's because it involves an intensive remediation effort. Can you just have a construction crew come in, rip out the floor, toss it in the dumpster, move on?
Once you discover via bulk sampling that you've got that much mercury in your floor, you're now standing on a toxic waste site. The operation to remediate, to remove one of these floors, it's just a massive operation.
Which logically leads you to the next question, which is, if that's the requirement to remove that floor, why isn't there a requirement nationally to identify these floors?
One of the answers to that has to do with trade secrets. If you have a formula that contains less than 10% of any one ingredient, you don't have to list that ingredient.
Even if it's toxic?
Even if it's toxic.
That means that many schools across the country are left in the dark about what's in their flooring. In 2020, New Jersey Senator Cory Booker introduced a bill that would require a federal registry of all schools that contain these floors, and he called on the EPA to investigate. The bill never made it out of committee. For both Melissa McNally and Tricia Dello Iacono, it's well past time for lawmakers to take action on this potential danger hiding in plain sight.
So many times I want to give up. And I say to Liam, this is too hard. There's too much to fight. And he looks at me and says, but who's going to fight? And so I keep going for him.
I don't get to just put this behind me and walk away. It's always there. It's always there. It's going to affect me for the rest of my life, and I don't want it to affect anyone else for the rest of theirs. It's only going to get worse. These floors don't get better. They degenerate, and they release more over time. We have to do something about it.
I'm Jay Core.
We're picking as much as you can today, right?
Annie Rausch-Gurnett never imagined that her entire driveway in Mount Airy, Maryland, would serve as a gateway of hope for her war-ravaged homeland.
At least if we can help with this, it will help them to survive and hold on.
This 37-year-old businesswoman who grew up in Ukraine recently organized a massive aid drive in response to the humanitarian crisis erupting in Eastern Europe.
And my heart is still there, so it's hurt me so much. My people and Ukrainians are gonna be hurt.
For Annie, this is deeply personal. Countless friends and family, including her 83-year-old grandmother, are in harm's way.
They've been hiding in the basements. It's really difficult to hear that they spend nights outside.
Hunkering down if and when the fight comes to them.
They are Ukrainians. They don't run. Nope.
This drive began with a simple Amazon wish list, requesting everything from medical supplies for wounded soldiers to non-perishable food for fleeing families.
We have a lot of stuff for babies, formulas, diapers, baby clothes, hygiene products.
But she never expected this. In less than 48 hours, more than 4,000 packages landed on her porch. She and 100 friends then spent an entire weekend culling and boxing up more than 50,000 pounds of goods.
It brought me to tears, and it's really, I'm really thankful, to everyone.
And we were there for a critical step in this process.
So here's the 67 pallets.
When employees of O'Sullivan Tree Care out of New York volunteered their time and their tractor trailers to load up items now bound for aid organizations in Poland and Ukraine.
I wish someday we can smile and laugh, but at this moment, probably not.
Annie's already planning her next relief drive from her driveway so that one day she can return to the beloved fertile plains and plateaus of her homeland to smile and laugh once again.